Well, good evening. I think we'll make a start. So good evening and welcome to this. It's the first of the second series of workshops hosted collaboratively by URC Education and Learning and Children's and Youth Work teams under the banner of URC Training. So do help us out by displaying your name if you can, rather than, I don't think anybody is, but sometimes we get people's churches rather than their names on display, and it's always nicer to feel you're talking to a person than a church. If you have any technical problems or issues through the evening, then Dan is our technical support, Dan Morell, so with tech in front of his name, so do just message him directly. This is a series of 3 very practical workshops on hybrid church for all, and they've been made possible by us tapping into the Carmichael Montgomery Bursary Fund, which we're also able to use to fund small grants towards implementing the skills that you learn. So we'll tell you a little bit more about that later, but we'll also send you a form so that if you want to start thinking about what you might want to apply for. These workshops are going to be recorded and edited and made available to you on YouTube. So Dan will ensure that it's only the workshop leader and anything that Sam's sharing that's actually visible in the recording. So please don't let that put you off having a camera on and being a friendly face on the screen. We'll send you access to the videos with a link and an evaluation form and details of how to apply for that grant that I talked about just a moment ago. As we go through, please feel free to put your questions into the chat. If they're not dealt with as we go along, there's going to be a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. And if we haven't managed to answer your questions, then we will make sure that the email we send out after the event gives written answers to questions that came up through the evening. And I'm delighted to introduce our workshop leader this evening, who is Sam Hargreaves. Sam, do you want to give us a wave?
Oh.
Sam co-leads Engage Worship with his wife, Sarah. He completed the London School of Theology degree in Theology, Music and Workshop and has been worked with their faculty for 5 years and is now a guest lecturer there. He also co-leads Resound Worship, the song website, and has led musical and creative worship at events like the Youth Work Summit and Spring Harvest. Do go to engageworship.org to find out more. Sam's passionate about worship that engages everyone, and he comes to us highly recommended by our very own Lorraine Webb, who from Children and Youth Work, who sadly can't be here tonight because she's still recovering from wrist surgery. But she completed a module that Sam was leading. So I'm delighted to be able to hand over to Sam at this point. Lovely.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you guys for all being here tonight. It's really nice to be here with you. And if it's okay with you, we're going to start with a little act of worship together. And this one's going to involve our physical bodies. Now, I am aware that we all have different levels of mobility and things. So I just want to encourage you that if I say something, please do try and join in if you can, but also feel free to adapt any movements that I say if there's something that works better for you. So is that okay? Great. So let's start by just grasping our hands like fists in front of us. That's great. And maybe close your eyes for a second and think about maybe what is distracting you right now. Are there any concerns that you have, items on your to-do list, worries about the future? Whatever you're bringing with you today, just imagine that they're held in your hands. Feel the tension and the effort that's involved in holding all these things in your fists. In 1 Peter 5:7, we read, "Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you." So I'd invite you to softly begin to open your hands, to let go of that anxiety, to allow God to carry your burdens. And next, if you'd like to spread out your hands wide in front of you, it's great. Psalm 143, verse 6 says, I spread out my hands to you. I thirst for you like a parched land. God, our hands are so empty and so full of need. And like the parched land cries out, we cry out, Lord, we are thirsty. We are so full of need. Come rain down on us. Fill us today with all that we need. Just receive God's refreshing as we hold our hands out. Great, you can put your hands down, and now if it's possible, see if you can get your feet, the soles of your feet touching the ground, and imagine that that is like the root of, if you're a tree, that's your roots, and your roots are going deep into the life-giving love of Christ. And I'm going to read a verse from Ephesians 3, and I want you to use your arms again to just demonstrate this. So Ephesians 3 says, I pray that we, being rooted and established in love, think about your feet, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp how wide, that's good, and how long, like this, and how high, oh, good stretch, and how deep is the love of Christ. And finally, for this time, let's raise our arms in praise to God as I read this part of a psalm. Praise the Lord, all you servants of the Lord, who minister by night in the house of the Lord. Lift your hands in the sanctuary and praise the Lord. Amen. Amen. You all look good on my screen. I was watching. That looked great. Thank you for joining in with that. Okay. So our theme tonight is multisensory hybrid worship. And I think it's worth saying, isn't it, that we are not just brains on sticks. We're not just souls that are kind of squatting in a physical body. Our God made the heavens and the earth, the seen and the unseen, the physical and the spiritual. And he made us as human beings with minds and bodies and souls and spirits. I'm just going to share my screen now. Oh, sorry. First, I should have said, here's the overview, and then I'll do the next bit. So this is the overview. I'm going to do a little intro first to what we mean by hybrid multisensory worship. And then I'm just going to go through 5 kind of categories: physical worship, interactive worship, smell and taste, honest worship, and video and visual. And with each of those, I'm going to give you a bunch of examples. This is going to be quite a practical session, just give you a lot of examples to kind of try out, to see for yourself, and to see what you can kind of take and use in your context. But yeah, Jesus said, didn't he? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And I think often in our churches, we'll maybe end up focusing on 1 or 2 of these aspects. You might be, oh, we're a real mind church. We're really about the intellect and the long sermons and the wordy hymns. Or you might be a very soulful church and very expressive and emotional. You might be a very heart church. Some theologians talk about the heart being about the will and the volition. It's all about making decisions. Or maybe you're a very strength church. You're all about the activity. You're all about the physical and the doing. But Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all of these parts of who you are. We're also made with 5 senses, aren't we? Touch, taste, smell, hearing, vision. And I wonder which of those is most often used in your service. I suspect that the smell one is not so intentionally used, if it is used. I suspect that the hearing a lot, maybe some visual, touch. We'll get on to talk about this, but that's been a really difficult one during the pandemic, hasn't it? When we've all been very distant from one another. And taste, you might think of the Lord's Supper, but again, it's a difficult one to do sometimes. But God has made us whole people. And finally, the teachers among us will know that there are lots of different learning styles or learning modes. And there's one called the VARC model you may have come across: visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic. And again, think about which of those is most used in your church. I'm sure that the auditory is the one that we focus on. We talk, we sing, we pray, we do a lot of things out loud with our voices. But actually, when you look at the research they've done with VARC, it tends to be that people have a pretty even split across those 4 ways of learning. And most people have a mixture of a couple of those things that they like to be engaged with most. And it does really concern me, I guess, that often we're communicating just on one level, and there may be people in our congregations. It's not that they're unspiritual or they're not interested. It's just that they're far more of a, say, kinesthetic learner or a visual learner, and we need to be perhaps thinking about how we can communicate with them. And I think this is particularly important. I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment because I don't want to be sharing all the time. It's nice to see one another as well. I think this is particularly important when we think about 2 key groups. I know a lot of you are here on the basis of working with children and young people. I think that's a key group, but also unchurched people, people who wouldn't normally come to our services, people who haven't come to church all their lives, haven't grown up in church, don't have the same conditioning that many of us would have had. My wife often talks about the skill of sitting in an uncomfortable pew for, you know, a few hours and listening to the same person talk for 40 minutes. And, you know, nowadays children and teenagers just aren't taught like that anymore. I'm sure if you go into schools, I'm sure if you go to youth group, it's not just a lecture. You know, people are getting them into groups, they're getting them to interact, they're getting them to do things practically and kinesthetically. And good teachers will use a variety of learning styles and modes. And again, you know, when people are on the internet, when they're online, they're not just engaging with one mode. There's multiple modes coming at them. And that's just normal in everyday life. And I think there's things that we can learn from those. And the good news is, during the pandemic, during the last couple of years, for all the horrors of and the struggles that we've had, there has been a gift for our church worship. We've had to stop what we were doing before. And I do a podcast we call Disrupting Worship. If any of you are interested in going and looking, it's on our website. And we had the worship leader, Noel Robinson, come for the last interview we did. And he talked about this as the church's Control-Alt-Delete moment. Do you remember that, when you had to restart your computer? I don't know if it's still the same on a PC. Control-Alt-Delete, you know, restarts things. And it's a bit like that for church. I think we had to stop meeting in buildings. We had to stop singing in the way we'd sung before. We had to try and go online. We couldn't touch each other. We couldn't meet in the way that we could before. And actually, I suspect that for many of us, going online taught us some things. There were things that were frustrating. There were things that we didn't get on with, but we also learned from doing things online. Certain things worked. So for many people, we found that, you know, that old style of meeting just simply wasn't working. Having long times of singing, things like that, that just didn't work for us. But if you met over Zoom, I'm sure you recognize that you could interact with one another. You could get people typing in the comments or making physical gestures, or different people preparing different parts of the service. And that made the whole thing feel very different. You could show perhaps more video or more photos than you would have done normally in your congregational setting. Maybe you got people to provide videos. I know we did things where we got people to go off and take photos or take videos and share them in the services. And I think that a lot of our best attempts at online online services were really leading us towards the multisensory and the interactive. And now, of course, we're in this strange in-between stage. Just by show of hands, how many people are meeting now in physical gatherings? Okay, most people. Yeah. So most of us have been able to get back together and gather when we meet. But I'm sure that many of us said, actually, there are certain people who don't want to come back to church yet. They're concerned about contagion, or maybe there were certain people that actually never really got to church before, and this whole pandemic opened up services for them because suddenly I can engage with it from my home, maybe because of mobility or disability or other kinds of things like that. And so we've entered this age where people are calling hybrid, where we're doing physical services, but we're also doing online. And again, I'm not so concerned. I know the next time you meet, you're going to talk more about the tech about this. I'm not really going to be able to answer tech questions this evening. But for me, the question is, what was God saying to us during that Control-Alt-Delete moment? What did we learn? How can we better connect with our congregations as whole people, hearts, souls, minds, and strength, as people with 5 senses, as people who engage in different learning styles? And how can we involve, all people, the young, the old, the new Christians, the mature Christians, those people with different learning styles, different cultural backgrounds? And so what I'm going to do is just give you some practical examples. And I think Sam was saying at the beginning that there's a handout which you can access. Has that gone out?
It will do in 2 seconds.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Dan. So Dan's going to send that out. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh, he just showed that great idea and I'm never going to remember what he said about where it was, or you are going to get a handout, and pretty much everything I share, there's a link to go and access it online. And most of the time it's a free PowerPoint or idea or that kind of thing. So don't panic when you see an idea and think, oh, how am I going to get hold of that? Because you will be told about that in the handout. And if you get to the point of having the handout and reading it all through and go, oh, but I still didn't find out where that thing came from, please do email me. But most things will be on the handout. The other thing I want to say is when I show you an idea, you are likely to have one of 3 responses. The first response is I'll show you an idea and you'll go, oh, that would work for us on Sunday. I'm going to use that immediately. That's perfect for my congregation. That's perfect for where we're at. The second response is, that would work, but I'm going to need to adapt it. I'm going to need to tweak it. I'm going to need to change it. I'm going to need to make it more like us. And I love that because I really believe in indigenous worship. I'm not actually a big fan of people who say, we've got the solution to how you're going to do your worship. That's not how we run our website. It's not how we run our ministry. What we want to say is, here's some ideas. Please take them and run with them. Please adapt them for your context, because you've got all sorts of different people. You're in all sorts of different places. We can't predict that, but you know, as the leader, what is going to work for the people that you've got, to do with age, to do with ability, to do with spiritual styles, all that kind of thing. The third thing you might think is, that idea will never work in my context. And if that is the case, that is absolutely fine. Please don't be offended if I share an idea and you think that is miles away from what we would ever do. Just hopefully something else that I share will work for you or will be adaptable for you. So yeah, that's just a little thing to just be thinking about as you see these ideas, to just be thinking, oh, is it immediately usable? Is it adaptable? Or is it something I'm just going to say, oh, well, that's not for us. Never mind. I'll wait for the next thing. Is that all okay? Yeah, good. Oh, I like the thumbs up. Thumbs up are great. Okay, well, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen again, which means I can't see quite so many of you, but that's okay. There we go. So first, I'm going to talk about the physical. And I've already mentioned this, that the pandemic, one of the worst things about the pandemic is that we're not able to be physically present, or we're reticent to touch one another. And when you're online, often you feel like, especially if it's a sort of streaming service, often you feel like you just sort of sit slightly inert on your sofa. Someone says, stand up, you think, oh, no one can see me, I won't bother standing up. And we miss out on all that. We miss out on the hugs. We miss out on the singing together. We miss out on sharing the peace or whatever other physical things you would do in your building. Now you're back in your buildings, but especially if you're doing this online thing, you're going to have to, the hybrid thing, sorry, you're going to have to think about how to engage the people in the building and how to also engage the people who are online. And the good news is that the Bible is absolutely full of physical worship. It doesn't take much to flick through and see people kneeling or lying flat or standing or lifting their hands or clapping or looking up. And different people like different things. Some people like to hold their hands out or raise their hands or cross themselves, or, you know, whatever it is. You will know what is kind of natural for your congregation and maybe what is going to take them a little bit out of their comfort zone. But I just want to encourage you as leaders to be really intentional about helping people engage physically, whether that's in the building or online or a hybrid situation. So I already showed you Sarah's physical prayer that we did right at the beginning, and that is on the website. It's on the handout, and you can go and access that, and you can adapt it. I'm sure you, as I say, there's lots of physical things in the Bible. So Sarah's taken some ideas from things from Scripture, but you could add in other things, and you could do things that you think will work in your context with the people that you have. There's another thing on the handout which is called hand prayers, and this is just simply using your hands, but putting them in different positions, postures, just to help you pray in different ways. So it might be hands together, hands open, might be pushing your fingers into your hands to make the sign language for Jesus. It might be clenching the fists. It might be, I don't know, cupping an ear with a hand, all those kinds of things. Really easy ways to use your hands. And that gets lots of different people involved. And I also think that's a good thing to take home with you. It's a kind of, you know, if you were at home and you think, oh, how am I going to pray today? Oh, I remember, you know, I can thank God. I can receive from God. I can thank God for the cross. I can lift up my friends. Whatever you've taught, people can use that in their own setting. I don't know how many of you are involved doing kind of liturgical prayers, written prayers. The church we were at most recently, Anglican Church, used this same gathering prayer every week. And so we thought, well, what if we just taught some simple actions? So God has called us here this morning, and we would teach the actions. All the world, do a big world, give God, point up, your praises. And then we do the sign language for praises. And that really captured our congregation, because actually, you know, people had said this prayer for quite a number of years. It's simple enough, but as soon as we said, right, why don't we all try doing these simple actions to these simple responses, suddenly people got really involved in that. And we did the same for our confession prayer, which again was the same format every week. So we just taught that one week, and immediately then people pick it up and they use it week on week. So you don't have to use this prayer specifically, but maybe think about the prayers that you do use on a regular basis. And could you add just that physical element? And if you've got people who know Makaton or who know sign language, they're a great place to sort of go to and say, hey, what's a good sign? Because actually there are some people who, if you say it's a sign, they'll be into it. If you say it's an action, they won't. Somehow actions has got a kind of, it's got a bit of a kiddie sense to it. But I think people who might be a bit embarrassed about doing an action would do a sign because it's a language. And the final thing on this is just an idea. You probably know the hymn, Here is Love, Vast as the Ocean. And we were going to do this in an all-age context, and we thought, oh, is it a bit long? A lot of words, hard for kids to kind of scan all these words at once. But there's a little chorus that Matt Redman wrote to go alongside it. So we thought, well, if we add some movements to this, so very literal, no love is higher, no love is wider, no love is deeper, no love is truer. I think we did the sign language like that. And we just taught that at the beginning. So everyone who was involved in that chorus, singing and physically, and then we sung the verses. And I guess if people really couldn't read or couldn't engage with those longer verses, they maybe zoned out a bit, but then they were back in again for the chorus. So again, you might want to think about that for your worship songs or hymns that you sing. Is there a refrain where you can say, oh, we could actually add a simple physical element to that refrain? And I would say this works particularly well if you've got people online, because that whole thing of kind of just feeling a bit inert, a bit couch potato-y on your sofa, if there's something where they're physically getting involved, it suddenly involves their physicality. So that is the physical. Does anyone, I'm just going to pause because I'm kind of rattling through this. Does anyone have any questions about the physical? Let me stop sharing. Do unmute yourself if you want to ask a question now. can see that Sam is sharing the links as well in the.
I was just thinking I'd love to learn the Lord's Prayer in sign language. It might be worth us trying to do some sort of training on it.
Yeah.
I think that works really well. And kids like getting involved with that, so do adults, don't they? And like you say, if you say sign rather than actions.
Yes. So it could be sign language. Jenny's putting something about some Macatron training next year. The other thing we've done is actually with a group of, was an all age group, is we had a conversation about the Lord's Prayer, and we came up with our own movements, but we sort of said, okay, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. What do we understand by that? And we had a kind of round table discussion. Okay, so what would be the most, out of what we've just said, what would be the most natural ways to physically embody that? You know, and so everyone together is coming up with, and then that becomes your way of acting out the Lord's Prayer. So that's great, Sarah. Thanks for that.
I've done that with young people, but I'm just thinking about the congregation I've got now. That might be quite interesting.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great, Sarah. Thank you. Anybody else? There's a great video by Becky George for the Lord's Prayer, which I think has just been posted. If anyone can recommend a lexicon or dictionary for Macathon, you can pop that in the chat as well. That'd be great. I love this. Crowdsourcing answers. Okay, I'm going to move on to interactive, which is good because we just had a bit of interactivity. Sorry, I'm just failing with my computer. There we go. So yeah, how can we get people involved in our services? How can we, we've talked about physically, but actually feeling like they contribute. Another word for this, I like, I think I got from Brian Eno, the musician and producer. He says he doesn't like the word interactive. He likes the word unfinished. And I love that idea that when you come to church, it's not quite finished. You know, the person planning it hasn't got everything planned out to the nth degree, but they're actually expecting the people who come to shape what's going on that gathering. And there are really simple ways that you can do this. So one of the things is show me how you are. I'm sure you've all done this on Zoom and stuff. How's everyone doing? Maybe do it out of 5. So, you know, 1 means, oh, I'm on the floor, I'm on my knees, I'd rather not be here, I should probably be in bed. 5 means I'm top of the world, and you just count people down. Okay, on 3, everyone show me how you are. Why don't we do it? Ready? Everyone show me with your fingers on 3 what your energy levels are. 3, 2, 1, go. Very good. Thank you. See, it's easy to do. You could do it with other things. You know, what's your week been like? You could get other bits of response. And that would be good if you're in a hybrid situation, because actually it's quite easy to say, well, everyone who's here, you do it. Everyone who's at home, everyone, you do it too. And it just makes it inclusive. Also related to that is obviously questions, which again, you can do live. You can ask the people who are in the room, and you can also do the kind of text chat, whether that's the Zoom chat box, or maybe you've got a WhatsApp group for your church, you get people to put it on there, or if you're doing Facebook Live, people can obviously type in things. And that could be part of the welcome, and you could make that as simple as, well, how are you feeling today? Or you can make it a bit creative. You could say something like, if you could describe your week as a meal, what would your week be? So some people might say, oh, it was cold porridge. You know, it was a really week. Some people, oh, my week was really zingy. It was like a vindaloo curry. They might say, oh, my week was, you know, it was a bit boring, but it was okay. It was a bit of kind of meat and 2 veg week. Those kinds of things. It could be to do with the sermon theme. You know, why do you think people are afraid of the dark? Pop your answers in the chat. People who are here in the congregation, maybe have a chat about it amongst yourselves, feedback, that kind of thing. Or maybe as a response, maybe you're talking about a particular sermon topic, and then you might want to say to people, okay, we've had that Bible story or had that teaching. How are you going to put this into practice this week, wherever you are? And again, you could get people to text that in, get people to talk about it and feedback to you. You can also do short popcorn prayers or popcorn praises. One of the ways we do this is using the song Give Thanks to the Lord. So, sorry, I'm just going to change my sound settings. Okay, so do people know the song? Give thanks to the Lord our God and King. His love endures forever. Yeah, I can see a few people singing along. So we'd say before that song, think about one thing that you are grateful to God for this week. Because the song is quite general, isn't it? It's quite kind of big picture. But I want you to think about one thing that you are specifically thankful for this week. People think about that, then you sing the song, and then get to the end of the song and keep that last call going and say, okay, the things that you were thinking about, I'd love you to share those. And you could do that on WhatsApp, Zoom chat, get people to call out. In fact, yeah, so however you want really. But we will often do that kind of thing, and we'll have someone will say, I'm thankful for the bright sunshine this week. And then we'll just sing, His love endures forever. And then you'll have someone else, I'm thankful for my family. His love endures forever. I'm thankful for my job. His love endures forever. And that's just a simple way of getting people's praises. If you think people will be a bit less confident to do that, another way of doing it is to give the people who are physically in the building a small piece of paper, and at the beginning of the service, write something down you're grateful for, collect them all in. People who are online can write it in the chat, and then someone at the front can stand and read those things, and then you can do that kind of interaction. You don't have to do it with that song. You don't even have to use a song at all if you don't want to, but that's one way of doing that. Similarly, for intercession, you might do a similar thing where you say, okay, I want to find out what do you people want to pray about? Maybe imagine you're praying around the Lord's Prayer, let your kingdom come. So I have a song that has the refrain, let your kingdom come, let your will be done. And I quite often say, okay, just give me one word of a place or a situation where you want God's kingdom to come. So people will say Afghanistan, they'll say in the economy, they'll say with homeless. And you have a few of those popcorn things, and maybe you're getting them on your chat or on your text message, and you read those out, and then you can sing again, let your kingdom come, let your will be done. And then you could ask for something else. Okay, maybe give me the first name of somebody where you want God's kingdom to come and his will to be done. Get those to come in again, and then continue to sing. So just that kind of interactivity so that people are shaping the praises or the intercession that's going on in the service. And the final idea for interaction is what we call Psalms praise. And this involves people opening their Bibles to the Psalms. And then we just say to them, we just love you to read just a sentence or one verse, not a whole psalm, not a whole paragraph, but just one sentence or one verse of a psalm out loud. And again, if you're online, people can type that into the text. Somebody else can read that out. But it's a really encouraging way of getting people to interact. If I was to say in a church service, average church service, right, anyone want to pray a prayer of praise, go for it. You'd probably get the same 5 people that always pray, right? It'd probably just be a very limited amount of people. But if you say, read a short bit out of the Bible, there's a lot more people who are going to feel confident to do that. And also for you as the leader, it gives you a little bit of a safety net, because sometimes you're a little bit worried maybe, well, if I open this up for interactivity, am I going to get something, pastorally insensitive or theologically iffy or whatever? But the Psalms are, apart from I've never had someone read the bit about bashing in babies' heads on the rocks yet. It's probably going to happen at some point. But otherwise, the Psalms are pretty safe, aren't they? You've got a fair bet that people are going to, read something that's going to be upbuilding. And again, you can do that, just literally people popcorning those around. You can intersperse that with music as well. We've done it that way. Again, whatever might work for your congregation. So I just want to throw this open as well. If people have any other ideas of things that they've done for interactivity. Could be things you've done on Zoom, ways you've just got people connected, working together. Or any questions about doing this, any concerns you would have about leading something like this?
There are those prayer globes, Sam. I'm sure you've seen them as well. They're inflatable globes that you can just throw around the congregation. If your thumb lands on something, you pray about that.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Really good.
I think as well, even with some of the older members of congregations and everything, if you do it gently, they get quite excited about it as well, because it gives them an opportunity to take part.
Absolutely. Yeah, my friend Grace, I think they're now meeting again physically, but towards the end of doing Zoom stuff, she really got very tired at generating, and just I think a lot of us feel that kind of creative fatigue, don't we? Of it's hard time in our lives to generate new stuff. And she said, I'm not gonna give you a long sermon every week. I'm gonna ask you guys to just bring, even if it's a simple thing, even if it's just a word from the scripture or a short prayer or a short thought. But she really threw it open to her congregation, and she really saw them step up. And I think often we feel as leaders that we've got to fill all the space. But actually, people are often quite hungry to bring what they've been given, but they need a sort of safe space to do that. And so I think some of these interactive ideas, you've got to create some safety nets around it, because, as I say, you don't want the ranting person or the sort of pastorally insensitive person to just take over. But if you can put some safety nets around it, you can really see people. I suppose the other way is actually to pre-prepare people, isn't it? It's to go and say to them, would you share something this Sunday? Would you lead the intercessions? Would you? But I think these things that are sort of in the moment are also really powerful. Great. We've got some information about the globes. Yeah. Ask people to bring things to church that meant what made them think about what holy space was. Great. Yeah, so bringing things along. And again, that works well with the Zoom thing. If you've got people on Zoom, you can say, well, go and find something in your house that represents something to you and show us on the screen, or show the person. Yeah, that's really good. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next theme, which is about smell and taste. And as I say, I think, God did make us with 5 senses, but sometimes it's the hardest thing to try and use smell and taste. Jesus, of course, gave us an act of worship, and it was communion. And I would guess that communion is really primarily about taste, isn't it? It's about putting something in your mouth and chewing it. It also involves smell, the smell of the bread, the smell of the wine, of the juice. I love that the fact that communion doesn't require people to be able to read or even to hear. It's a very inclusive act. It's something that pretty much everyone can get involved. I mean, I'm gluten-free, so that's a little barrier for me, but as long as you provide me with gluten-free bread, I'm okay. So it's very inclusive, works across ages, across learning styles. And yeah, if you're in a hybrid situation, if you've got some people at home, it may be about, if you're doing something in the building, you might say, well, could you go and get a glass of water, because we're going to do this next thing that's going to involve drinking from a glass of water, or go and get yourself a piece of bread, or get yourself whatever it is you're going to be asking them. If it's something quite specific, it may even be about going out beforehand and asking and sort of taking people something. So if you're going to do something with, I don't know, fair trade chocolate, you might have to go and do a little thing around to the people will be online and say, this is for Sunday, don't eat it yet, save it till the Sunday service. But it might pique their interest to think, oh, I wonder what we're going to be doing on Sunday with this chocolate. They might make sure to join in. But yeah, some ideas with taste that I've used. Salt, obviously, whenever you're sort of using anything in the Bible that is a food stuff, I think it's always a good idea to, if you can, to try and actually help people taste that. So there's stuff in the Bible about being salty. You could give out tiny salt sachets, get people to think about what is, that you only have to put one tiny grain of salt in your mouth, don't you? And you taste it. It's so powerful. It's so evocative. It could be a bitter taste. I've done things with, the coffee beans that you're supposed to eat. Hand those out. Think about the bitterness of, say, unfair trade or injustice. Breads, lots of use of breads in the Bible. So there are probably quite a lot of different opportunities to use. And breads are also, you just go to the supermarket and, well, again, as a gluten-free person, this is slightly, saddens my heart. But for most people, you can access breads from all over the world, flatbreads and, round breads and all sorts of different kinds of breads. It might be to do with honey. It might be another sweet taste like that. The Bible talks about the word of God being like the honey on our lips. And there's stories about the rabbis putting tastes of honey on their followers' lips and getting to taste the sweetness. We've done things with tastes from around the world. We've invited people to bring kind of finger foods from either from the country of origin that they're from or from a country that they've visited. If we've been talking about, a sort of global Sunday or something like that, we've done things around taste and see that the Lord is good. I remember my friend, she made what looked like a chocolate cake, but it was in fact a lemon cake. And it had brown food colouring in it, but it tasted very strongly of lemon. So she got people to try this chocolate. She said, what is this? It's chocolate cake. Taste it. Oh, it's lemon cake. And that whole thing of taste, you've got to try it. You can't just... judge by looking. You have to taste it. You have to ingest it. You have to taste and see that the Lord is good. And then also smells. So smells, this is probably the hardest, but I think you could talk about, Jesus talks about we are the fragrance, or someone talks about we're the fragrance of Christ. It's probably Paul, isn't it? So you might want to use some perfume to talk about that. You might want to use incense. I don't know if you're open to that, lighting an incense stick, maybe talking about the prayers rising to God, stuff from Revelation. I've never done this myself, but I've heard about people having bread makers in their church, which are set so that they will be ready for communion. And can you imagine the smell if you walked into a church building and there was sort of 3 or 4 bread makers going on around the room, and then you got that bread out and you used that fresh bread for that? Well, I think that would be really exciting way to do it. And if you were talking about Jesus is the bread of life, what a multi-sensory way of doing that. I remember as well someone using rubbish once. They had like a bag of rubbish, and I think the same passage talks about the stench of death or the fragrance of Christ, and got people to smell that sort of thing. So I can see lots of good ideas are coming up in the chat now, so I'm going to go over to these. We asked people to bring things to church. Oh, sorry, that's what we've done before. Chocolate covered crickets when preaching. Who was that? Where's Jenny? Oh, Jenny, well done. Do you want to tell us anything more about chocolate covered crickets?
It was really fascinating. I was quite surprised at the number of people that actually ate them and the level of conversation. That was what was most amazing. People talked about it because they'd experienced it. Awesome.
Love it. Where would you get them? Asked Mike. Ruth's not up for it. Outdoor space. Yeah, that's a good idea for passers-by. I mean, maybe not the crickets, but, giving out food, it's always good. Catholics have nailed the smells thing. Yes, thank you, Leo. We've got lots to learn there. Yeah. Anyone want to unmute themselves and say about a smell or a taste thing?
I've done the making bread in church, and it's really powerful.
Awesome.
We're going to do making bread outside over our fire pit in our outdoor church space.
Yeah.
And then people are think this is this Sunday for our harvest, and then people are going to come into church, and we've got a kitchen area in church, and they're going to have bacon butties and coffee.
That sounds perfect. I'm coming to your church on Sunday, Dawn.
St Catherine's in Holton, Wiltshire.
Brilliant. Love it. David?
I used a Guardian recipe. I'm sure other recipes are available, as they say, to do soda bread. And you can actually do it from start to finish. Actually mix the ingredients at the start of a service, go and bung it in the oven, have your act of worship. And I brought it out and it was done within 45 minutes of the start of a service, and then cut it. So you got the smells. When I cut it, all the steam came up and everyone had some. So you can actually do that. We don't have to do one. Here's one I made earlier. You can do it. You can do the whole shebang. And I've done it twice and people really loved it. They remembered it.
Of course. Yeah, so evocative, isn't it? Smell and taste, it brings back memories in a way that you know. Hazel.
Sorry, go on.
Go ahead. No, sorry.
Right. During the summer, I had one of my first hugs with my granddaughter over the pandemic time. And she gave me a big hug and she said, "Oh, you smell of Lichfield Church," which is our church. I thought, my goodness, why is that? You know, is it that I was wearing a particular perfume that she associates with coming to our church? But it gave me a really good idea for a talk sometime, you know, as a church, because she then said, "You smell of Lichfield Church," which is a good thing. And I thought, well, that's good to share with the congregation and think, how do we smell as a church, as it were?
Yeah, that's brilliant. My grandparents lived in Lichfield for a long, long time. I've got many fond memories of Lichfield, yeah. Anyone else while we're on the smelly tasty? Muddy church, yeah. Quite a few people talking about outdoor stuff. I don't know, Sarah and I run a thing called Park Church, and out of that, I don't know if you've seen it on our website, but we've done a book called Worship in the Woods, which is 10 outdoor worship sessions. So do feel free to look at that if you want. But we've done communion or sort of informal Lord's Supper where we made our bread on a little something called a rocket stove, which burns the wood very hot so you don't get smoke. We did sort of flatbread on that, and then we squished our own grapes to make our own grape juice. That was good.
One other thing. Sorry,
go on, Dawn.
Sorry, Sarah. One other thing. I used to work at Bath Abbey, and the rector, when he did an informal evening service, we didn't have any facilities in time to do refreshments or something. He actually bought in his own barbecue, and for an informal service, he cooked a meal as part of his talk on the barbecue. So the Abbey was filled with his burnt cabbage or whatever he did at the time. But it linked in well with what he was talking about. So he was being very creative.
It sounds brilliant. I can just imagine the person, you know, the warden or something going, "This is health and safety nightmare."
Yes. The risk assessment was pages.
I bet. Tom, you were going to say something.
Yeah, it was around, I've done making butter in churches, so you can have cream in small jars and you get the people to shake it while something else happening or during the sermon, then it can turn into butter, which then, yeah, you've got the transformation there, but also then it can be shared at the end as well.
That's great. I'm just laughing because people know there's this £200, which has been just mentioned, and someone's suggesting £200 worth of chocolate covered crickets. You could buy a pretty good barbecue, couldn't you, for 200 quid? Sorry, I shouldn't encourage frivolous spending.
I was just going to say the taste and see. I used the jelly beans. You know, they're quite weird flavours, so they're not what you see. They look like one thing again, a bit like the chocolate cake, but the kids love them. And just love hearts and sweets and things like that for services as well. You know, bringing things like that in.
Yeah. That's a great idea, Sharon. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on. This is great. Thank you so much for pitching in. It's so much better when people bring their own ideas. Okay, just going to mention honesty in worship. Lots of people talk about lament. That tends to kind of come up in at least in circles I'm in. I find for me lament, I mean, I totally into that, but I think often the word puts people off because they imagine something very kind of over the top and the weeping and wailing and rending of garments and things. Whereas actually, you know, I just want to start with the word honesty. What if we came before God and we were honest about how we felt? And of course, we see that in the Psalms, don't we? We see the psalmist pouring out his heart, and you know, we see people like Peter who are just, you know, always saying the wrong thing to Jesus, but you know, Jesus still accepts him, and God, you know, he can take whatever's going on, especially in these times of pandemic, and as we sort of start to process all of that. People need the space to actually say, well, this is how I feel, or this is what my doubts are, this is what my worries are. And we need to be prepared to say that stuff to God. Heard a talk the other day, someone was talking about the Psalms and saying, you know, the thing about the Psalms is they say anything, but they say it to God's face. You know, and if you're in a relationship, you'll know, you know, if it's a good relationship, you definitely ought not go and talking to other people about your problem with your partner, but you ought to be able to go to your partner and say, this is how I feel, this is how you made me feel. You want to do that to their face. And I think that's true with God as well. Let's bring God what is on our hearts and say it to his face, and he's big enough. And so just giving people ways in gathered services to do that. And it is difficult sometimes because often we, you know, a little bit English, stiff upper lip, all of that. Don't want to be too extreme. Don't want to, you know, get people down. But I've got a few examples I can show you of things that we've done. Hold on. Sorry. Can't drive. There we go. So the first thing, this came from another book. This came from the Harvest Worship book we put out of 3 harvest services. It's a simple introduction to Lament, and I got people to, maybe in groups or if they're at home with the people they're at home, just talk about, what do you feel sad about? Just ask that question. What do you feel sad about right now? And people might, again, they might say COVID, Afghanistan, my dog's ill, whatever it is that they feel sad about. And then you get a bit of feedback. Okay, let's find out what did your group say? What did you say at home there? And get that feedback. Say, okay, someone said Afghanistan. Right, God, you know we feel sad about Afghanistan. And then the response is to say, you see our sorrows. So you just put your hand down your face like that. Can you try that? Just like a tear going down your face. You hear our cries. We lift our burdens to you. And then you get another one. We're sad about a friend losing a job. God, you know we feel sad about this person losing their job. Let's say together, you see our sorrows. You hear our cries. We lift our burdens to you. And if you want to go into this a bit deeper, it's based on the story of Hagar in the Old Testament, and how at one point it says, you are the God who sees me. She says, you have seen me, you've seen my sorrow. And then later on, when she thinks the boy Ishmael's going to die, it says the Lord heard the boy's cries. So that's where, if you want to go into that story, but you don't have to. And that's just a way of bringing our sorrows and the sorrows of the world before God in a very simple and accessible way. My friend Grace, I do the Disrupting Worship podcast with her, and she told the story on this episode where we're talking to Andy Flanagan about how they do Lament in her church every week. And what they do is they have a piece of newspaper. Everyone gets a piece of newspaper, and that's just symbolic of whatever is on your heart that week, whatever is you're struggling with, or you're burdened with, or your pain or questions. And she just gives everyone that piece of paper, and then if they want to, they can bring it up and they can put it on a plate on the altar table. I think they play a lament psalm being sung over the PA, and then they just offer those things to God. And she said when she started it, she really wasn't sure if anyone would want to do it and if they would be able to keep it going. But she said from day one, pretty much everyone would come up and put their thing, and they would ask, "Are we going to do that again? That was really good." And she's just made part of their liturgy to have a moment of lament every week. So you can hear about that more on the podcast if you're interested. And finally, I wrote a song which really came out of the idea of the sort of stiff upper lip idea that we have in funerals in the UK, where often people hold it in. I held it in. My grandma said to me after my granddad's funeral, "I held it in. Do you see? I didn't embarrass myself, you know." But she never processed that grief, and she held that grief for the rest of her life. And so I wrote a song based on, you know, various parts of the Bible, a bit of Ecclesiastes, bit of Jesus saying, "Blessed are those who mourn," those kinds of things, to say actually there's a time for tears, there's a time to grieve. And there's a video that goes with this. That's still, I don't have time to show you the whole thing, but you can go and look at that on the website. And if you can download and you can use the video, or you can sing, you know, the song with musicians. And you'd obviously need to frame that, but you could use that. It doesn't have to be for a funeral. You could use that at any time, especially, you know, it used to be when I talked about lament, I'd have to say, well, some people are feeling bad and we ought to remember them. But quite honestly, after the last 2 years, I think all of us have got something to lament. All of us have got something to grieve and to be honest with God about. And if you truly don't, then part of lament has to be about lamenting for other people and grieving on behalf of others, because there's plenty of pain in the world. So that is that. I'm gonna move on to talk about video and visual, because I want to give time for questions at the end. Yes, this is another good thing I think about the pandemic, is it has obviously pushed all of us to think more about using the visual, because especially if you've been on Zoom or you've been online, you've needed things to go on your screen, you've needed videos. I'm sure you've all kind of looked around, what can I use legally? It's been a big question on our minds, isn't it? What's legal to use? I just want to give you a few examples. Yeah, all these links are on the handout, as I said at the beginning. But if I think that they're going to try and capture the chat as well. So if there's been things that have been put as links that have just been done today, I think we'll try and put those in the email as well. One idea is to do something called Visio Divina. You've probably heard of Lectio Divina, where you read the Bible and you reflect on it and you ruminate and you pray and then you rest. Visio Divina is doing the same kind of thing but using an image. So reflect on an image or a painting or a photograph and allow it to move you to pray. And my friend Timo pointed me towards the National Gallery has free downloads, a lot of Christian classic things like this, Delacroix, Christ on the Cross. So Timo gave the example, imagine that you're sitting somewhere in this scene, you know, where are you? Which character would you be sitting there? Can you hear the cries of Mary? Are they loud? Are they quiet? Can you hear the words of Jesus as he says, Father, forgive them? Allow the Spirit of God to speak to you as you sit at the foot of the cross. And there's other places you can go for material like this. There's something called the Visual Commentary on Scripture, which is a freely accessible theological art gallery, where what they've done is for every Bible text, they've asked a curator to choose 3 contrasting pictures. So often they might have, say, one that's a kind of classical piece, one that's a modern piece, and one that's from another part of the world or something like that. Yeah, this is what that looks like if you want to go to the vcs.org. And so, yeah, you would just click on, I mean, they haven't obviously done the entire Bible yet, but they've done a lot of the Bible by now. And so you would click on the reference that you're speaking on or you're thinking about, and you find 3 contrasting images that you could use. And with anything like this, it's always, obviously, you know, these have been put there for you to use, but it's always worth crediting whenever you can where it's come from. Most people are happy to have their work used in that way, as long as it's actually credited to them. And then, oh yeah, so this is the Sermon on the Mount. There's the 3 pictures that have been chosen for that text. And then not finally, but I also use Unsplash and Pexels a lot, which are secular photo sharing sites, and they are shared intentionally so that you can reuse them, and you can change them, and you can edit them, and you can do things with them, and it's all free and above board. And one thing I would say about this is just be careful in what you use, because often they're quite staged, the shots, or they're quite beautiful. So the example I thought of was I put in work, and you get all these lovely trendy people with their Apple Macs and their lattes and their white backgrounds. And honestly, I don't know many people who work like this. You know, I can see into most of your homes, and your homes don't look quite like this, you know. And what if you've got people who work in your church and they're a builder, or they're a, you know, all sorts of different jobs. They're not all these kind of trendy people. So just be aware of that kind of thing. And sometimes you need to sort of search a little bit deeper to find something that is really good. People are very visually literate nowadays. So you have to be extra thoughtful about not just, you know, okay, work, a desk, brilliant. Not that's the sort of, you know, denotation, but what's the connotation? What's the kind of subtext to that picture? If you use the smiling lady in the middle, that is going to connote a particular thing. It's not going to make you think, oh, the average, you know, boring Monday when I'm tearing my hair out. But yeah, I do really encourage you. I use these websites all the time, Unsplash and Pexels, and they are super, super useful. And the other thing is crowdsourcing. So actually asking your congregation to send you photos. So it might be that you ask everyone and you say, could everyone, I've done things, everyone take a picture of their workspace this week, wherever you work with. Everyone works with something, whether you're just washing up, or whether it's at a desk or a school or out on the street, wherever you go and do something, just take a picture of that space, send them all in, and we'll do some sort of prayer activity around that kind of thing. Or you can commission someone. So I'm sure you've got some talented photographers in your congregation, and you can actually go to them and say, hey, could you do a series of shots on this? And I think the more local, the better. You know, if you can use a lot of those kind of stock images, they're clearly not from your town. But if you've got, you know, recognizable spots from your town on your screen, or however you use them, that's going to be really powerful, I think. And we've got a bunch of things on our website. My friend Richard Lyle, he makes both PowerPoints and videos. You can read over the top of them. You can get people to reflect on them slowly. So this is an example of Psalm 121. So you could have a sort of voiceover reading over this. Richard's just a really talented designer, so it's just something a little bit more than maybe most of us could work up ready for a Sunday. And yeah, my friend, well, what is this? This is just all the Bible reading ideas. So yeah, just go and have a look around. There's about over 400 free ideas on our website that you can go and you can use. And that's our YouTube, if you want to check out our YouTube. And again, all of our videos are okay to use on streaming and those kinds of things. People panic about that. If you're on any social media, do follow us if you'd like to. It's a good way to get our information. And also, if you sign up to our website, you can sign up for our emails, and we can send you information about what we're doing. But we do have a few minutes if people have questions. Has someone written a question in the chat that hasn't been addressed? Maybe looking at Jenny, have you spotted anything? Or
I think the one was Roger asking about the videos. whether you can use them because they've had issues with YouTube, but you've covered that, and I think it's just that attribute them is the point, isn't it, as well?
Yes, I mean there is also that thing of, certainly if you're doing Facebook Live, it has those algorithms that shut things down, and YouTube a bit as well. So you do have to be quite careful with that stuff, and sometimes it misattributes it, because we had a video of a Christmas Carol, and I think the algorithm must have thought it was somebody else's recording of that Christmas Carol, and there's nothing we can do about that, but I guess you've got to just trial things and see what works. But yeah, attributing wherever you can, making sure, yeah, live broadcasting, absolutely use our stuff on that, it's no problem. Dan ran a session on copyright recently. Good job, Dan.
I was just going to say as well, on the 13th of October, I'm running another one at 1:30 on Wednesday the 13th of October, which is with Mersey Synod, but anyone's free to attend, so do get in touch with the Synod to register, and I will be running one with Yorkshire as well soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that.
Brilliant. The information that's gone on the chat there. That's great.
Do they contact you, Dan?
Contact the Synod office.
Any other questions?
Which synod, Dan?
Mersey.
Huh?
Mersey Synod.
Mersey. Thank you.
That sounding Scouse is really difficult.
I was just going to say, Sam, I take photos when I'm out with my dog, especially in the mornings, because I stay by the canal in Clydebank, and you get some cracking shots. And if I'm using my own, I don't have to worry about copyright and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think I mean, using your own, or crowdsourcing is just brilliant, because the quality of cameras that we're all carrying around in our pockets is just insane, and especially if it's an outdoor shot, you're going to have good lighting, so yeah, that's a really brilliant idea. And also for using for things like Bible readings, prayers, getting people to do a little clip of themselves on their phone, and either putting that into a service on a screen, or doing it over Zoom or over YouTube or whatever. Oh, I love these Playmobil readings. That sounds like fun. That's great. Really good.
And
if you got any, go on.
Faith at Home, our weekly resource for families on faith adventures at home. There's quite a lot of alongside Bible readings and Bible stories, those kind of things as well. So check out our YouTube channel.
Yeah. If we've got a couple more minutes, do feel free to write a question in if something's coming to mind, just how you apply this stuff, or any questions about making it work in your context. I'll just wave a couple more things that we've done. I don't know if people have seen this book, Jesus and Emotions. So we're talking about honesty and struggle. This is written by Sarah, my wife, for families specifically, and she kind of was doing quite a bit of research on the whole subject of emotions and how kind of psychologists see emotions. If you've ever seen the film Inside Out, I think that was the primary inspiration, because it's such a brilliant film. And then there's a great book by Pete Scazzaro called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and it sort of set her off on a journey. And as she read more about it, she realized Jesus is the most emotionally healthy person you can ever meet, because he has all those emotions, but he also knows how to handle them. And so she wrote this book, Jesus and Emotions, which kind of just takes you through joy and anger, fear, surprise, sadness, but it's written in a way that's intentionally for families to sit down together and talk about. So if you're interested in that, that's on our website. And then just the other thing is these kind of seasonal service books. This one is for Advent, Worship in the Waiting. We did one for Lent called Worship in the Wilderness. I waved the harvest one at you, and they've got basically between sort of 5 to 7 services, basically all planned out but adaptable, different ideas, some of them all age, some of them more reflective, some of them more active, some of them, you know, songs and hymns, sermon outlines, and then lots of with the book you get a load of downloads as well, so you get access to a load of videos and PowerPoints. So it works really well for hybrid, and for a couple of these, like for that harvest and the Advent, there's also like daily devotionals as well that go along with it. So if you want people to read like a Lent book whilst they're doing it, that can work really well.
I'm just wondering about
Okay, I think I haven't seen any more questions being posted.
Sam, I think Jenny just was going to say one more thing.
Sorry,
Jenny,
Sam.
you go ahead.
I was just wondering about perhaps those who are not able to engage, who to come in physical. If you do give them a task to do, like I'm just thinking from Louise's mobile Playmobil stories. You know, could you do a Bible reading? Take some pictures of it as you do it, send it to us. Use it, and then you've got the people not able to be in worship at the same time. I'm just thinking from Louise's inspired me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, I think it's a brilliant idea, and you know, if it's, you know, whatever, a family or something, they might be able to do that really easily. If it was someone who is less mobile, you might say, "Can I come round?" And you know, if they're up for it, you know, video you reading this Bible reading. I love the kind of the horizontal aspect of all of that, the way that it just kind of puts us all on the same footing, and you know, gives everyone more of a voice than the sort of, you know, the old. It feels to me, you know, we had this kind of broadcasting mode, and we're all learning actually there's more to it than that. I think that's quite exciting.
I had something, Sam, actually. The emotion idea again, just thinking about that each week, trying to engage with people as we plan our lessons. The first page is always what you need for your lesson, because we do that online as well, and an emoji page. And it's amazing, been doing this through the lectionary, and each week we can find emojis to go. So like we're doing harvest this week, you know, the harvest emojis, and we've been doing, so it's in a fun way as well.
Cool.
For children and families.
That's great.
Just to get them to engage as a family or on their own, you know. And
it's really good.
Always leave one blank. How are you feeling? You know, feel a circle. Yeah.
That's cool. Thanks, Sharon.
Okay, well, I'm afraid I'm going to be the bad guy and wrap everything up now, because we've hit time, and we want to respect everybody's boundaries. Want you all to get to have time to relax and recover before the next day. So I'm sure before you all dash off to start planning your next bit of creative worship, I'm sure you'd want to join me in expressing our great thanks to Sam for sharing his expertise in such an enjoyable and informative evening, and thanks to Dan for providing the tech support. So just a reminder, keep watching those emails, and possibly your spam for the follow-up email, which will have the handout and an evaluation form, and of course the grant form. And don't forget, we're running 2 more workshops to support you in running hybrid church. So on the 14th of October, Dan will be taking us through some technical tips. And on the 21st of October, we've got 3 URC ministers who'll be sharing their learning from experience. So it will be the highs and lows of having tried to lead hybrid worship in very different styles of worship. Learn there. So I'll just close our time with a short prayer. So, dear Lord, we've gathered together online. We've joined in community via tablets and laptops, phones and computers. We've gathered to learn more so that we might more faithfully and
looks like Sam
all together. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.